We're in Davos, Switzerland, at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, where the conversation among the world's business and political leaders is dominated by war, inflation, recession fears, and a host of other challenges. They're calling it here the poly crisis. Is it really as bad as all that? And are the high-flying elites who flock to the Alps every year really improving the state of the world, or actually making it worse? From the conflict in Ukraine to the lingering effects of the COVID pandemic, to the uncertain economic outlook, to the future of US-China relations, there's a lot to worry about as the World Economic Forum met and looked forward this week to 2023. I'll be talking later with the mayor of Kyiv, Ukraine, about the war there, along with his brother, who's helping in the defence of the country. The CEO of Bank of America will give us his take on the US economy. And the leading commentator on geopolitics will tell us whether the world might be at a turning point. But first, Davos used to be a place where the top business and political leaders would come confidently every year to lecture the rest of us on how the world should be run. Now, if any of them was ever embarrassed at the hypocrisy of showing up in Switzerland in their private jets while telling us how important it was to save the planet from carbon-driven climate change, they certainly never showed it. They were the masters of the universe. And as the top guys from Wall Street, Silicon Valley and elsewhere rubbed shoulders with international government officials, celebrities and activists, they thought they stood at the very pinnacle of the world order. But times have changed. The popular backlash against globalism shows no signs of abating. After years of financial crisis and economic weakness in the US and elsewhere, voters' trust in these so-called global leaders has declined sharply. Now, there were few leading political figures here this year. They don't want to be seen supping with the global elites while voters back home shiver through a tough winter and a cost of living crisis that won't go away. It was notable, actually, that there were a large number of Democratic members of Congress here, as well as members of the Biden administration, but only a couple of Republicans. Still, important work does get done here, and this year the big story was the war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke by video link from Kyiv, appealing for yet more aid from the US and Europe to help in the fight against Russia. His wife, Olena Zelenska, gave a speech in which she scolded the billionaires here for not doing enough to assist in a fight she said could mean the collapse of the world as we know it. I sat down with Vitali Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, and his brother Vladimir. Both men are former boxers, and they are now in the fight of their lives against the Russian invader. Joining me now is the mayor of Kyiv, Vitali Klitschko, and his brother, Vladimir Klitschko. Thank you both for being here. You've both been here in Davos this week, raising support for Ukraine, obviously among world leaders and the others who are here. Mr. Mayor, if I can start with you, it's obvious that Russia's been conducting this campaign, this intense campaign over the last couple of months, designed, obviously, at kind of knocking out Ukrainian infrastructure in major cities, attempting to eradicate, water supplies, energy, power, essentially to kind of sap the will of the Ukrainian people. You have been warning that they have been doing that. We've seen some terrible episodes, especially very recently. How is that going? I mean, how are the Ukrainian people handling this onslaught from Russian forces at the moment?
The Russian army doesn't have success in the battlefield, and that's why they last time starting to genocide and terrorism. I don't have enough words to destroy civil infrastructure in our country. It's mean destroyed electricity right now, power plants, and less people freezing. Right now it's pretty cold weather in Ukraine, -10, -20, sometimes -30. In this condition, weather condition, to let people live without electricity, without heating, without water, it's genocide. And instead, they try to bring the whole country and people to depression mood. Instead, people very angry. And I listened 1,000 times. People told better without electricity than with Russians. And the Russians have total positive reaction from the people, and people very angry and ready to defend our hometown.
So this campaign, as damaging and as brutal as it has been, is not undermining the will of the Ukrainian people to keep fighting the Russians?
No, definitely not. The mood in Russian people, the mood in Ukrainian people is pretty strong against Russians, and everybody is angry and ready to defend our hometowns and defend our home country.
You both here, what are you hoping to achieve? What have you been trying to achieve? There are a lot of American members of Congress here, a lot of American business leaders, a lot of European political and business leaders. What are you trying to achieve in your conversations with them?
Not to get tired supporting Ukraine. Why for the Americans, as you just previously asked, why is it important to support? If Ukraine fails, which is not going to happen, the more we're going to get bombarded, the more resistance Ukrainian people will give, because this is senseless. And if Ukraine fails, the Third World War is going to start. It's going to be repetition of the Second World War under Nazi regime and Hitler. We're going to face another one. So we are in one ecosystem. We cannot say I would say the free world, which Ukrainians belong to, as well as in the US, you cannot look away if something is going with your allies in European Union. And we're part of Europe, and we're part of the free world. And that's why it is extremely important to remind people how important the topic is, how important to support Ukraine is, and not to get tired.
You talk about World War III, and Vitali, you mentioned the threat of nuclear weapons. Again, I think a lot of Americans and maybe some Europeans worry that this war, that as Vladimir Putin clearly isn't making the progress he wanted to make, that he will escalate and that he could resort to nuclear weapons, and we could find ourselves obviously in a nuclear war with Russia, nuclear armed power. The West could find itself in a nuclear war with Russia over Ukraine. And as terrible as the plight of Ukrainians is, why should the West find itself in a nuclear war with Russia over this?
Everybody make a mistake. It's a lot of experts and a lot of politicians in the world think Putin will be happy and quiet with an action with Crimea. It's doesn't touch him. It was biggest mistake, and after that, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Putin is unhappy with that. They starting to make much more aggression, and right now attacking Kyiv. And I'm more than sure that Putin goes so far as far we're allowed to go, and they tell to public. They present himself as collector of former territory of Soviet Union. And please don't forget, the part of territory of the Soviet Union was Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. He talked about Baltic countries. And please don't forget, I told it to Germans, big part of Germany was part of Soviet Empire, where Putin working as a KGB agent years long.
Finally, Mayor, how long is this going to take? Again, you both mentioned you want to ensure that Europeans in particular, that the will to keep supporting is not weakened. But obviously it's having costs on the rest of the world. This war it looks like Russia's in for the long haul. How long do you reasonably expect to be able to keep fighting like this?
It depends from support what we receive. It's very important. It's former fighter. I tell you, size is not important. It's not important how big are you. It's very important will and spirit. And Ukrainian fighters, Ukrainian patriots is very motivated. We defend our homes. We defend our families. We defend our future of our children. We're fighting for better future of our children. And it's huge motivation. The Russians fighting for the money. Putin pay well to his army, but it's the main priority for us. And also a lot of depend from support. We tell thank you very much for United States, thank you very much for our partners for humanitarian help, for political support, for weapons delivering, defensive weapons, because we defend, I want to do defensive weapon, because we defend our homeland. Ukraine always was peaceful country where live peaceful people, more than 70 nations. We never ever was aggressive to anyone. But in this case, right now, we doesn't have another choice. We have to defend our future, defend our country. And thank you very much for our partners.
Thank you both for being here. You're both fighters, as you said. We're used to seeing you in the ring, and we're watching you fighting now, and with great support. And there's a tremendous amount of support in the United States and the rest of the world for what you're doing. Thank you very much indeed for being here.
Thank you.